So Nintendo's mascot is Mario, right? And they don't really have many other mascots. Sure, maybe some of their subsidiaries have their own mascots, like how HAL has Kirby and Lolo and Howdog, and the Pokemon Company has Pikachu, but Nintendo doesn't have any of their own mascots other than Mario, right? Well, what about system mascots? The first ones that come to mind are the Mii, and that's it. But they once had another mascot for one of their systems, or more precisely, an add-on to one of their systems. If you've ever looked at any of the covers for games released for the Famicom Disk System, you may have noticed this little guy in the corner. That is Diskun. Diskun was a mascot created specifically for the Famicom Disk System. And well, there weren't a whole lot of plans made for him aside from appearing at the end of commercials and on these covers. I don't know what artist created him, but I like him, he's cute. He's appeared in a bunch of games starting with 1987 Smash Ping Pong for, well, guess. This is objectively the weirdest game published by Nintendo. Why though? I mean, it's just ping pong, right? No, this is Konami's ping pong. But they replaced Konami's Penta the Penguin mascot, who I just made a video about, with Diskun on the title screen, and it seemingly contains a cameo from Donkey Kong, who's on your player's side in the audience. Why does this exist in the way that it does? Konami could publish their own games. Why did they put Nintendo characters into this game and hand it off to Nintendo to publish? What deal was made here and why? Whatever, it's interesting nonetheless. Since then, he's cameoed in a bunch of other games, which is what you probably know him from. However, he actually has his own game, and it's not published by Nintendo. Instead, it was published by Tokuma Shoten, the publisher of everyone's favorite Famicom magazine, Family Computer Magazine, or Famimaga for short. In the issues of this magazine, they ran a series of comics about Diskun, where he has a family and apparently he fights off an evil Disk who is illegally copied. Yeah, it's pretty wacky, but I can't really give you an overview of it. Why? Well, these comics aren't properly indexed. Of course, I can find some of them by searching up archived issues of Famimaga, but I can't read just the whole comic series in order. There was this Famicom World forum post that linked to a DeviantArt page that I guess had all of them, but I can't access it anymore. So here goes the lazy YouTuber once again asking somebody, anybody, to create a complete index of Diskun comics. Towards the end of the Famicom Disk System's life, Famimaga ran a series of contests where people could design their own Disk System puzzle games, and winners would get their games actually made. For one of these contests, they didn't even have a winner in place, so instead published a port of a little MSX2 game that was being developed by Compile called Puyo Puyo as the 5th volume of the series. By the way, and so many websites get this wrong, the MSX2 and Famicom versions of Puyo Puyo are not even remotely the same game as the Sega arcade game. It's completely different. It's like a Puyo Puyo Zero. Anyways, the last of these games, and the last Famicom Disk System game ever released, was Janken Disk Joe, set in the universe of the Diskun comics. Now, given that Diskun is, well, a disc, you would think they would have, I don't know, made a game around that concept. Instead, they made an adventure game involving block pushing puzzles and rock paper scissors, or Janken. Yeah, I didn't make it too far in this game, mostly because I suck at these kinds of games, but it actually seems pretty fun. All I have to say about it is that every disc besides Diskun looks terrifying. It's weird how Tokuma Shoten got away with this, but I guess they did get some sort of permission from Nintendo to make this game. Now, Diskun isn't that obscure, but everything around him is. He's a pretty cool character and a part of Nintendo history. Now, besides Mii's, he isn't the only Nintendo system mascot. There's also Satebo and Parabo, the two mascots for Nintendo's Satellaview broadcast service for the Super Famicom. They also seemingly had a comic, but I can barely find any info on them. They look interesting, but there's not much to say about them, and sadly it seems that Nintendo didn't have a mascot for their final add-on platform, the 64DD. Unless you count Doshin the Giant, but we should probably move on. Anyways, since we've covered obscure Nintendo mascots, why not cover obscure Sega mascots really quickly, because there's a lot, so don't expect me to go into too much detail on each of them. Once again, just like Nintendo and Mario, it seems ridiculous that Sega would have any mascot other than Sonic, but unlike Nintendo, they had been making video games for a while before their big mascot came around. But even after Sonic was introduced, every Sega console had their own specific mascot. The Master System had Alex Kidd, the Mega Drive and Game Gear had Sonic, the Saturn had Segata Sanshiro, and the Dreamcast had Mr. Sega, or Hidekazu Yukawa, a real Sega employee. And the SG-1000 had Billy the... Okay, but jokes aside, the SG-1000, Sega's first console, actually did have a mascot. And just like the console, he's the most obscure one, a fancy rabbit character named Professor Osselbean, who appeared in some SG-1000 and even some Mark III, the Japanese Master System, game manuals giving the player some tips. But surely Sega doesn't have that many other mascots, right? Well, they also had mascots for the Sega Channel service for the Mega Drive. For the Genesis version, they had this silhouette guy, supposedly named Sega Pat, and in Japan, really? You already have this character. Probably the most notable Sega mascot aside from Sonic and Alex Kidd is Opa Opa from Fantasy Zone, who premiered a few months before Alex Kidd, who I guess could be considered a mascot of Sega's arcade division. But what about Sega's most famous arcade division, AM2? They have a couple of characters that could be considered mascots for just them. You could consider Akira from Virtua Fighter a sort of mascot, kinda like how Ryu from Street Fighter could be considered a mascot for Capcom. There's also Bean. Bean was a character from an arcade title called Dynamite Ducks made by AM2, who they later repurposed into a character called Bean for Sonic the Fighters, who is actually the original Bean's son, despite the fact that his species has been stated to be a woodpecker, and his father is a duck. After this, Sega AM2 started putting him and their other Sonic the Fighters original character, Bark the Polar Bear, in a whole bunch of other games either as playable characters or cameos. Now, I really wanted to point this out. Despite the fact that starting with the Archie Sonic comics, they've been portrayed as villains, they were specifically distinguished as being friends of Sonic in Gamers Magazine issue 173's official plot description for Sonic the Fighters. Honestly, I liked them better as friends of Sonic, and the attempt to make them into villains feels so forced, like it's a conscious effort to do so because somebody doesn't think Sonic has enough villains. Like, come on, Bark the Polar Bear is a bad guy instead of Sonic's friend? Bean the Dynamite is a murderous psychopath instead of a cool dude who just happens to use bombs as a weapon? But AM2 actually has a pretty clear mascot, right there on their logo. Yes, the palm tree is a mascot. This palm tree is seemingly a reference to their game Outrun's imagery. I feel like Outrun and the palm tree are the reason Sega is associated with blue skies and whatnot, and I can't be the only one. When I first heard people talking about the Sega blue skies thing, I was completely baffled. I associate Sega more with games like Golden Axe, Altered Beast, and Shinobi, not necessarily games known for having blue skies. Plus, they always marketed themselves as the edgy alternative to Nintendo. So I just never really saw them this way, and the whole thing kind of baffles me. Is it just me? Anyways, the AM2 Palm Tree is actually a playable character in their crossover fighting game Fighters Megamix. There's quite a few weird characters in this game. It's very clear that AM2 was trying to compete with Tekken's wackiness with this game without compromising the integrity of Virtua Fighter by putting this stuff in a Virtua Fighter game, which I'm very afraid of them doing with the next game. Sega has a lot of mascots, but I think AM2 Palm Tree really wins the award for weirdest Sega mascot. Sega has a bunch of characters, but it's debatable what could be considered mascots, so I'm just gonna move on. But hold up, what about that Mr. Sega guy who I mentioned was Sega's mascot for the Dreamcast? Isn't it so weird that they used a real guy as a mascot? Well, he isn't the only one. Let me introduce you to my favorite piece of trivia that a shockingly low amount of people seem to know about for some reason. Like, tons of people have played these games without ever realizing that the character they're playing as is a real person. Did you know Master Higgins from Adventure Island is a real guy? Meet Toshiyuki Takahashi, or Takahashi Meijin, or Master Takahashi as he went by, an employee of Hudson Soft. In the Japanese versions of the Adventure Island games, he's the main character, while in most of the rest of the world, he was just stated to be a fictional character, usually called Master Higgins, which actually isn't that far off of a translation of Takahashi Meijin, which, if translating the characters in his name and the meaning of Meijin, would come out as Master Highbridge. Very distinguished sounding. Takahashi became a bit of a celebrity in Japan and a mascot for Hudson Soft after their first Caravan event, a competition they held in Japan centering around the game Star Force. He was notable for his sick gaming skills and ability to mash the fire button 16 times a second. But it was actually 18 times a second, he was just being humble. Anyways, when they gained the rights to port the arcade game Wonder Boy to the Famicom, they couldn't use the name Wonder Boy or the character, which were owned by Sega. Just the actual game itself, which was owned by its creators Westone, who gave the rights to them. As a workaround, they replaced the main character with Takahashi Meijin, calling it Takahashi Meijin no Bokenjima, or Master Takahashi's Adventure Island. They even made a 51 episode anime series based on the game. Yeah. Later, from 1991 to 1995, they released 6 sequels. Honestly, Adventure Island is a pretty good and underrated series, all things considered. In fact, I can say that about Hudson as a whole. It's really sad that they got bought out by that Pachi Slot company. I wish they got the HAL Laboratory treatment instead, or were somehow able to find another way to survive. They went from one of the most respected video game developers and publishers to, oh yeah, that Mario Party and Bomberman company. Man, play the Adventure Island and Star Soldier games and shut up. But before I end this section, I guess I should talk about the elephant in the room, or rather the bee. Hudson has a bee mascot on their logo called Hachisuke, which out of all of their mascots should probably be considered their main one. Hachisuke has cameoed in a bunch of games, but strangely has never starred in one, and because of that, Pachi Slot company sadly never will. A similar, albeit different situation to Takahashi Meijin's occurred with Data East character Jimbrobrov Karnovsky from their 1987 arcade game Karnov, who sort of became their mascot. According to some Data East employees, they created the character based on one of their senior executives. When he found out, he apparently wasn't too happy, but Karnov is cool, so I don't know what he was upset about. But unlike Takahashi Meijin, we don't even know who this guy looks like or much about him, just that they made a game based off of him. He's probably best known by the fighting game community for being one of the most overpowered fighting game characters of all time, Jalico. Everybody loves Jalico, right? Their main mascot is pretty much Ninja Jajamaru-kun, a character who is literally stolen. See, Jalico ported a game by another company, UPL, called Ninjakun to the Famicom. They wanted to make a sequel to that game but couldn't, so they just called the character Jajamaru and left it at that. Here's Ninjakun, and here's Ninja Jajamaru-kun. Spot the difference. They made him their mascot and made a bunch of sequels and basically kept using this design. Though weirdly, Jalico was able to make another Ninjakun game for the Super Famicom. It's confusing. They also tried to transition the design into 3D. I mean, they could do it now. Speaking of now, Jalico's IP is currently owned by a company called City Connection, which is named after one of Jalico's games. City Connection is not a particularly well-liked game. It was well received when it came out, but almost no one likes it now, and for good reason. It's janky and annoying. But apparently someone liked this game and its main character Clarice. The company was founded in 2005 as a video game soundtrack company named Clarice Disk. But in 2014, Jalico went bankrupt and Clarice Disk saw an opportunity, bought up Jalico's IP, and renamed the company City Connection. So who is this Clarice anyways? People who have only played the NES version of City Connection are probably especially confused right now. I don't remember a Clarice. City Connection starred some cool James Dean rebel dude. Well, that was just a change made for that version. In the original version of the game, you play as Clarice, a 15-year-old Californian girl who is on the hunt for a boyfriend. So she travels across the entire world recklessly driving a, probably stolen given her age, Honda City in the search for one, while avoiding cops and a particularly annoying cat. That is such a stupid idea for a game story, it loops around to actually being kinda good. Though there's a weird undertone there, but I don't think it was intentional. It's wholesomely wacky. It's very creative for a 1985 arcade game. It's just unfortunate that the game isn't as fun as that premise, as this game's only lambuxuaciously appealing. Here's the thing though, the Famicom version of this game is extremely historically significant, and almost everyone who's played it doesn't know this. So you may have heard that Super Mario Bros. Is basically the maximum size a Famicom cartridge was ever supposed to be, and because they had reached this technological dead end, this was one of the things that inspired Nintendo to create the Famicom Disk System. Well, City Connection released literally the week right after Super Mario Bros. Release, and it's the first Famicom game to surpass this dead end, as it's the first one to include memory mapping functions. I'm not really qualified to explain this, but basically, in order to fit the game's large amount of graphics, such as its detailed backgrounds and this portrait of Clarice, they needed to expand the hardware in the cartridge itself to allow for more graphics to be stored in the character ROM than the Famicom itself can allow, and did so through some circuitry, effectively creating the first mapper for a Famicom game. Over time, the cost of creating mappers would become less expensive, and ironically, the Famicom Disk System, which was partially created by Nintendo to get themselves out of the technological dead end that they had found themselves in with the base Famicom, had actually reached a technological dead end, as the size of its games couldn't be increased, while cartridge games were increasing in size thanks to the implementation of mappers, which were becoming less expensive to produce. While City Connection isn't a very good game, it's a technological achievement, I guess. I honestly found that more interesting than Clarice herself, as there's honestly not a lot else to say about her other than what I already described. City Connection just sort of uses her Honda City, and that damn cat as mascots now. But the real best Jalico mascot will always be Super Dog Booby. Moving on, the MSX line of computers is probably the best known of the ancient Japanese PCs that could play games, and it's probably because the Metal Gear series began on the MSX too. But who was the mascot for the MSX? MSX Boy. Well, that's boring. I need something more exciting. Well, how about this thing that appears on the MSX2 box? His name is Ashguine? Hold up, let me check the katakana. It's pronounced Ashguine? They chose the hardest possible name to say. Anyways, Ash here was kind of a mascot for the MSX2, appearing in commercials and obviously on the box. But he also got his own games, a trilogy, all of which released in 1987. Seeing as I cannot emulate MSX games given my circumstances, I can't play them, but I can comment on the character. He's not particularly appealing, and obviously they weren't going for a cute thing with him, but he's not even really appealing as a cool character either. He's just kind of goofy. Now, I knew all of the mascots that I'm covering before I began working on this video, but I asked you guys if you knew of any weird mascots, and this was the only one that came up that I wasn't aware of that I felt was interesting because he's very much not a traditional mascot. But I don't know a whole lot else about him. There's a bunch of other mascots for more obscure systems like the crocodile for the FM Towns Marty, who's named Mr. T. Yeah, they missed the opportunity to call him Marty, but I don't really have anything else to say about him. But Ashguine is interesting, and I'm gonna make sure to play his games sometime in the future. Now I want to talk about Asmik-kun. Asmik-kun is the mascot of Asmik. They're probably best known for publishing LSD Dream Emulator for the PlayStation, so they're not that well known. Asmik-kun appeared on the title screens for a lot of their early games, and wow, this is such a good character design. It's so appealing, charming, and timeless. And he has 3 games, released from 1989 to 1991. Wow, these must be fantastic. Well, the first 2 are just clones of the classic influential game Heiankyo Alien for the Game Boy. The first game was actually released in the US as Boomer's Adventure in Asmik World, and holy crap, I can't believe it. Not only did they not redesign him for the Western market, they even kept his pink color scheme intact. Nintendo. I gotta give them props. This box art is a little too good. It looks kinda out of place with most third-party Game Boy games released in the West. But Asmik-kun's third and last game would be a platformer for the Famicom. I don't really like it, and I can't really explain why. It feels terrible to control, and the game is overly cruel, even for the biggest masochists. A cross kills Asmik-kun? Well, I guess we all know what that means. Asmik-kun may be cute, but he's the spawn of Satan. Really, I only wanted to talk about little Asmik-kun because he's such a fantastic design that had to be wasted on mediocre games, and that makes me feel bad. You deserved better, Asmik-kun. Now let's talk about a mascot with an amazing design who actually has a good game. So you know Chunsoft, developers of the first 5 Dragon Quest games, the company that basically invented the visual novel genre step by step, they actually have a mascot, believe it or not. And it all starts with their humble beginnings. Enix's founder, Yasuhiro Fukushima, wanted talent to be able to develop games for his company. So he held a programming contest in Japan where programmers would send in programs in the hopes of them being published by Enix. This is how legendary figures like Yuji Horii and Kazuo Morita, who, if you've watched my basically every Lost NES game video, you should remember, got their start in the video game industry. But the first prize winner was Chunsoft founder Koichi Nakamura with his little game called Door for the FM7. This game wound up being published by Enix to literally anything they could publish it to at the time. Guess which version is most popular overseas? In Door you play as a thing named Chun, named after a nickname given to Nakamura based off an alternate reading of the first character in his surname. Chun has beef with these little aliens for some reason, so he must trick them into going inside of doors in this little puzzle platformer with Pac-Man inspired enemy behavior. If you like closing doors, then you'll love Monsters Inc. I'm sorry, Hotel Mario. I'm sorry, Door. How many aliens can you shut up? After the release of Door, Nakamura would found Chunsoft, named after the character named after his nickname, and the rest is history. This game has so much style, with its muted color palette that makes the vibrant colors of the characters pop out more. And these character designs are excellent. It's very rare that you have someone who's both good at programming and designing fun games, let alone designing appealing characters. And Nakamura did all three at once with this game. It's not at all shocking that he won. These character designs are amazing, they're so cute. Chun even does a little foot tap while waiting for the aliens to go in the doors. Someone has some explaining to do. These character designs have basically been wasted, as not only has Chunsoft basically given up on using Chun as their mascot, his game hasn't even received a true sequel outside of an expansion sequel in 1985. What really makes me thirst for a sequel to this game is the Famicom version's cover, which depicts the characters in this paper cutout style. Imagine the gangbusters a new Door game in this art style would do on a modern Nintendo platform. Also, it looks like he's enticing them with candy, which you don't actually do in the game. The candy is just a point bonus, but this is a funny detail. I'm actually kind of mad. These character designs are too good for this game to not have a sequel, and for Chunsoft to not use them more. Asmik-kun and Chun deserve better, but whatever. Before I leave, I just wanted to include some quick honorable mentions. I didn't have much to say about them, but somebody was going to complain if I didn't mention them, and I want to sleep tonight. G-Mantle was SNK's mascot for the Neo Geo. Cool design, but I don't find him that interesting. So I already did the whole video on Penta, but Konami had two other mascots. For some reason they really liked using the Moai heads from Gradius as a mascot, and even made a game for the Famicom starring a cute one named Moai-kun. Konami Man and Konami Lady were basic superhero mascots for Konami. Konami Man first appeared as a cameo in the game Road Fighter, and they both starred in Konami's crossover YY World games. Yeah, I think Penta was their best mascot, and the one they should have stuck with. If you want to know more about him, check out my video on it. Capcom also had a similar superhero mascot called Captain Commando. He was created by Capcom USA, so not exactly a Japanese character, and appeared in the manuals for their NES games for a while. It seems their arcade division took a liking to him and made an arcade game where he sports a much more iconic redesigned appearance. Also, get it? Captain Commando, Capcom. Toaplan had a mascot named Pipiru who first appeared in Zero Wing. Yes, that game. I actually played that game because of the meme, and when I got to the credits and saw these things, I was very weirded out. Similarly, Compile had a mascot named, I think, Lander. I could barely find enough information about it, but it appeared in a few of their games, but was phased out when the Puyos from Mado Monogatari started getting more popular and they made a certain puzzle game about them. I know the Lander's best for appearing in Gunneck, a game I really want to talk about but haven't found the chance to. Hebe and the other characters from Hebereke are Sunsoft's mascots. I didn't talk about them because I want to save it for another time. That's about it for what I wanted to talk about. Thank you for watching. This video was excruciating to make. This weekly upload schedule I've decided to do this month is killing me. If you want more obscure mascot videos, check out my videos on Konami's Penta and Magical Cat Adventure. One thing I need to say, I decided I was only going to talk about actual game characters or company mascots, so no magazine characters. Sorry, 3DO Duck. I might save you for another day. One last thing before I go. I want to start showcasing fan art at the end of my videos, so send me your fan art to my social medias or @ me or tag me or whatever. It can be fan art of my avatar or just things that frequently come up in my videos like Yosaku or Super Dog Booby. But mainly I want to see characters I mentioned in this video get some more love. You know, I want to see more fan art for characters like Ashguine, Asmik-kun, and Chun and whatnot. I want this to be more than a video. I want it to sort of rejuvenate these characters. I'll start putting this stuff at the end of my videos and crediting people in September. Thank you to my patrons. Have a wonderful day.